Hello, everyone. Welcome to Untold Story, the channel where we explore history's most complex and lesser-known conflicts. Today we dive into turbulent 15th century England to learn about the Wars of the Roses, a series of civil wars that pitted two powerful noble houses, the Lancastrians and the Yorks, against each other for control of the throne of England. This dynastic conflict not only left a deep mark on English politics and society, but also brought the Middle Ages to an end in England, ushering in a new era under the Tudor dynasty. The Wars of the Roses was one of the most dramatic and devastating conflicts in English history, as it involved the nobility in a fratricidal struggle that plunged the country into decades of instability. The name comes from the heraldic emblems of the two rival houses, the Lancastrian red rose and the York white rose. However, this name was coined in the Victorian era and was not used by contemporaries to describe wars. To understand the origin of this conflict, we must go back to the Plantagenet dynasty, the royal house that ruled England since the mid-12th century. They had ruled intermittently for more than 3 centuries, but by the 15th century, the dynasty began to show signs of weakness. The inability of King Henry VI, a weak and mentally unstable monarch, to maintain control of the kingdom was one of the key factors that led to the Civil War. Henry VI, of the House of Lancaster, had inherited the throne as a child after the death of his father, Henry V, one of England's great warrior kings, known for his victories in the 100 Years' War against France. Unlike his father, however, Henry VI was incapable of ruling with a firm hand. He suffered from bouts of madness, which made him incompetent to lead the country in times of crisis. His weakness created a power vacuum that other nobles tried to fill, leading to tensions and struggles for control of the court. One of the leading figures who challenged Henry VI's authority was Richard, Duke of York, an ambitious man who had a strong claim to the throne, as he was also a descendant of the Plantagenet dynasty. As Henry VI's mental health deteriorated, Richard positioned himself as protector of the kingdom and began to gain support among the nobility. This growing rivalry between the House of Lancaster, which supported Henry VI, and the House of York, led by Richard, was the spark that triggered the conflict. On May 22, 1455, tensions flared at the First Battle of St. Albans, considered the beginning of the Wars of the Roses. In this battle, the Yorkist forces, led by Richard of York, defeated the Lancastrians, marking the Yorkists' first major victory of the war. Although the battle was small compared to subsequent engagements, it had a significant impact. Henry VI was captured by the Yorkists, and Richard assumed control as Lord Protector during the period of the king's incapacity. However, Richard of York's victory was not the end of the conflict. Henry VI's supporters, led by his queen, Margaret of Anjou, did not give up easily. Margaret organized the nobles loyal to the Lancaster house and prepared a counterattack. Over the next few years, both sides engaged in a series of bloody battles for control of England, with constant shifts in the balance of power. The conflict reached its climax at the Battle of Toten in 1461, considered the largest and bloodiest battle of the entire war. This decisive confrontation, which took place in the middle of a snowstorm in the north of England, resulted in a crushing victory for the Yorkists. Following this victory, Edward of York, Richard's son, was crowned Edward IV, establishing the Yorks' rule over England. Although the coronation of Edward IV seemed to mark the definitive triumph of the Yorks, the war was far from over. Queen Margaret and her allies continued to fight from exile, and in 1470, they managed to briefly restore Henry VI to the throne with the help of one of Edward's former allies, Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker. However, this restoration was short-lived. The following year, Edward IV regained power and Henry VI was imprisoned in the Tower of London, where he died, possibly assassinated, in 1471, ending the Lancastrian leadership. For the next few years, Edward IV ruled with relative stability, but infighting within his family continued. After Edward IV's death in 1483, his eldest son, only 12 years old, was proclaimed king as Edward V. However, before he could be crowned, his uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, removed him from power and proclaimed himself king as Richard III. The disappearance of Edward V and his younger brother, known as the Princes in the Tower, remains one of the great mysteries of history. Many believe that Richard III was responsible for his assassination in order to secure his control of the throne. Richard III's reign was marked by controversy and mistrust, which led to a new rebellion, this time led by Henry Tudor, a distant descendant of the House of Lancaster. Henry Tudor, with the support of those dissatisfied with Richard's rule, gathered an army and landed in England in 1485. The war culminated in the Battle of Bosworth, one of the most famous confrontations in English history. On August 22, 1485, in the hills of Bosworth Field, Richard III's forces clashed with Henry Tudor's. Despite Richard's numerical superiority, the treachery of some of his key allies, such as Lord Stanley, weakened his army. Henry Tudor achieved a stunning victory, and Richard III was killed on the battlefield, becoming the last English king to die in combat. His death marked the end of the Wars of the Roses and the beginning of the Tudor dynasty. Henry Tudor was crowned Henry VII, and in a symbolic act intended to unify the country, he married Elizabeth of York, the daughter of Edward IV. This marriage sealed peace between the houses of Lancaster and York, leading to the rise of the Tudor dynasty, which would rule England for more than a century. The emblem of the new dynasty, known as the Tudor Rose, combined the red rose of Lancaster and the white rose of York, symbolizing reconciliation between the two rival houses. The Wars of the Roses marked the end of the Middle Ages in England and the beginning of the Tudor period, an era of relative stability and prosperity for the kingdom. During the reign of the Tudors, England underwent major political, economic, and cultural transformations, including the Protestant Reformation and the rise of the absolutist monarchy. The war demonstrated the dangers of dynastic strife and the chaos that could be unleashed when the personal ambitions of nobles came before the well-being of the kingdom. In addition, the figure of Richard III became one of the most controversial characters in English history. For centuries, he was portrayed as an ambitious and ruthless villain, thanks in part to the work of William Shakespeare, who immortalized him in his famous tragedy, Richard III. However, the view has been re-examined and many historians have questioned the veracity of the accusations made against him. Thank you for joining us in this analysis of the Wars of the Roses. This is a reminder of how dynastic rivalries can plunge a nation into decades of war and chaos, but also of how history can transform over time, giving rise to new eras of stability and change. If you liked the episode, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell for more intriguing stories in Untold Story. See you in the next one.